Good evening. Welcome on into the Monday Smash, usually the Sunday Smash, but we're doing it on a Monday because we were celebrating a championship that Florida State University clinched on the field against Louisville. It was amazing. It was in Charlotte, North Carolina. I saw in the flesh Russ Voorhis, really cool guy, even better in person. Maybe insurance guys get bad reps, Ira. I really like my 35-second interaction with Russ. He's a good guy. And if you need insurance here in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, he's got you covered, right?
Yeah, I don't know what the stereotype for an insurance guy is, but Russ probably doesn't fit it. Yeah, and he like I've said before, it's he stands out in the crowd for a lot of reasons. A big dude, and no, we had a great time the other night in Charlotte. He was there at the party that was hosted by the Charlotte Seminole Club, and we were lucky enough to be at. But Russ was there with some of his friends as well, and he's a great guy. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but yeah, russforhis.com is the website.
I don't know where to start, Ira. I'm sure people are still upset. I know they are for a fact. I'm on the warchant.com message board to Tribal Council, which you all should subscribe to. Subscribe to our YouTube page. Hit that thumbs up as you're watching us. You certainly would appreciate it. Almost feels worse, like a day or so, letting it kind of settle in. You turn on ESPN this morning, Get Up is on, and they've got that beautiful graphic of the bracket, and you're thinking to yourself, did Florida State lose on Saturday? Like, I was there. I thought they won, and they're not on that bracket. A lot of emotions people are still working through. Where are you at right now, Ira?
Yeah, it's the thing that stinks about it. There's so many things that stink about it. And excuse my voice, nasally. I'm dealing with a little bug that we picked up at some point on the. Well, hopefully we didn't pick it up, Aslan, but I picked it up. But the thing that stunk really so much was that the game ended, close to midnight. It was a late game on Sunday night. It was, 8:00 starts. He ended late Saturday night. And then you really woke up Sunday morning and really, people want to celebrate the win, but then you start getting nervous thinking about the playoff. And then so really you didn't get a chance to celebrate winning an ACC championship because the window was so tight. And then you find out you got screwed. And so then it just goes to anger. Then it's what's going on in the sport. And what was interesting to me is I got a few phone calls and texts from people last night that don't even care about Florida State, like media members and just people I know who were like really bothered by it. How this happens. This is how this sport is run, where they just pick whoever they want to send in. It doesn't matter what you did on the field. And it's been good to see all of this, all the criticism they've gotten today, which is great, but it's after the fact. I just wrote a column that I posted on the website kind of about how ESPN, I feel like, has been setting the stage for doing this now for the last several weeks. We all kind of dismissed it as, oh, well, it won't matter as long as you're an undefeated Power 5 champion because they've never kept one out before. But then once they do, what do you do? And so it's just to me, it's a combination of anger for this Florida State football team, that these players, these coaches, these fans don't get to continue a magical season and see what they could do in the playoff. But it's also just like disturbing about the state of the sport and that it doesn't feel like everybody gets a fair shake, and you don't ever want to believe that about your sport. So it's just a lot, man.
Ira, do you think, quote unquote, the fix was in? I mean, you mentioned that ESPN was kind of, setting the groundwork maybe for an undefeated Power 5 champion like Florida State getting jumped, which ultimately did happen. Was there a discussion in that room in Grapevine, Texas? Was that debate? Was that earnest discussion amongst adults? Or are those the 12 people that rubber stamp a decision that was maybe created somewhere else in another boardroom elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, you hate to be conspiracy theorist, but I don't know, man. I don't know if it was directly, and I wrote this in the column, like, I don't know if it was directly, Greg Sankey and, Jimmy Pitaro at ESPN and like in a smoke-filled room putting in a call and saying this has to happen, or if it was just you have a playoff committee and they know who pays the bills. They know who puts on this whole charade of these rankings every week. And you have all of the talking heads on those platforms for weeks and weeks discussing that Florida State wasn't very good and that Florida State didn't live up. This was all before Jordan Travis. And this is the reason, like when I wrote my column, I didn't want to get into all the specifics. I didn't want to get into why it doesn't matter that Jordan Travis wasn't healthy, that this team overcame that, why this team has one of the best defenses in college football, and they should be in there. I don't want to get into because to me, there's no defense for what they did. So there's no reason to keep arguing it. They did what they did. Now the question is, how does that happen? And can we do something to make sure it doesn't happen in the future? Because, again, I don't know that the fix was in the sense that they were told how to vote, but I think the fix was in they constructed the narrative. Even again, going back and if you read the column, and people have shown this clip on Twitter, but it was before Jordan Travis got hurt. They did that game show scene on game day where you had, Kirk Herbstreit and the whole crew picking up scenarios. And the scenario that they really hyper-focused on was, what if everybody stays undefeated, but in the Power 5 schools, except the SEC? Are you going to keep out an SEC school? And they completely lampooned that idea. They dismissed Florida State. They said, no, they're not. Basically, they shouldn't be in the conversation. And that was before Jordan Travis got hurt. So I think the Jordan Travis thing is just all a smokescreen at the end. Like we can use that as something that we can point to. So yeah, I don't know if it was a complete fix in terms of like they were told to do it, but I think that it was set up that way and they created the scenario and here we are. And what's concerning to me about it is you could sit here and say, oh, well, it's not going to happen next year because there's going to be 12 teams. Well, okay, who's going to get in that 12-team playoff? Is it only going to be one? Is the only chance you've got to get in if you're not in the SEC or the Big Ten, you have to win your conference? Is that the only chance and you have to be one of the highest ranked teams? Because it looks to me, based on what we saw this year and what we've seen in the past, I think it's going to be a whole lot of SEC and Big Ten teams. And it sucks, man. It's not good for the sport, I don't think.
Hey, I'm going to step aside for like 45 seconds. I'm going to ask you a question and put you on the solo screen. I got something on the stove I forgot to turn off. So what happens when you're a single guy, everybody? You can't just yell at somebody in the house like, hey, kids, turn off the stove. Dad's working. I don't want to get into a whole bunch of scenarios again, but if Georgia were to have won, do you still think Florida State would have gotten jumped? Do you still think Texas somehow would have even finagled ahead of Florida State, who was undefeated? You would have had 4 undefeated teams, and it feels like that would have been kind of the end of the story.
Yeah, no, I think if Georgia had won, I think there's a good chance Florida State gets in. And I get that some people feel like Texas still would have gotten in over Florida State, but I don't think so. My theory is they just realized at some point during the season, when I wrote about my column, which you guys can read over at warchant.com, my theory is they realized midway through the season that Georgia was not a dominant Georgia team. Georgia was not a great team this season. They didn't play a good non-conference schedule. And they didn't look great in a lot of their conference wins. And I think there was a concern. There's a lot of smart people up there at Bristol and in the SEC offices. And I think their concern was, what if these other Power 5 leagues don't have any losses? And we're the only ones with a loss. Well, what are we going to do at that point? And I think Florida State's the most convenient target. And so that's where they went after them for a bunch of reasons, mostly because of the ACC's perceptions. But you can't – there are so many – the whole idea that Florida State shouldn't get in because, they're in the ACC, like that. Let me go back to the reason we were okay with the committee having this directive of picking the best teams instead of just going with the highest ranked undefeated teams or whatever it is, like we used to do, was to prevent a team that was in a conference that wasn't seen as one of the best conferences not playing anybody non-conference and just kind of cruising in with an undefeated record.
Like and Liberty.
Right, exactly. But then they get into a New Year's Six Bowl. But yeah, my point with, Florida, it would be like if Louisville this year, for example, Louisville did not have a tough conference schedule. It's just the way it worked out. Everybody doesn't have equal schedules. So if you had a school like Louisville, say they had gone undefeated and say their conference schedule was not as good as, and then in their 4 non-conference games, say they played 4 just joke cream puff schools. Well, you wouldn't want to feel like you're obligated to put them in. So that's why we give them some ability, some prerogative to really choose the best schools, not to screw a team that went undefeated in the ACC and then scheduled LSU and Florida, which again, they play Florida every year. It's not like a choice, but that's a non-conference game that they're choosing to play. it's not their fault that Florida didn't turn out to be a great Florida team, but they scheduled two SEC schools plus their conference schedule, and they won at Clemson. They beat Miami. They beat Florida. They beat LSU. They did everything you could ask to keep them out, just because you don't think they're as good as anybody else is ridiculous. Again, the whole idea that they get to decide who the best teams are is a joke, because they had Georgia number 1 week. Then the next week they have them 6. Oregon and Washington. I mean, there's just so many examples where they had no idea what was going to happen. Vegas had no idea what was going to happen. And if you've earned the right to be in the playoff, you should be in the playoff. So for me going forward, nothing's going to fix this. Jordan Travis has never, the finish for 13, that whole thing is kind of gone by the wayside. Who knows how many of these guys are going to play in the Orange Bowl? Who knows what this team is going to look like? But so that all stinks, and it stinks for this fan base, and it stinks for the school and financially and all the different reasons. So you're not going to fix that, but I do think we need to look at the sport. And so I welcome Rick Scott or anybody else who wants to put pressure on college football playoff to not just let this happen and move on, but to actually look at what happened and see if it can be fixed for the future, because it's not good for the sport.
Yeah, I mean, mentioned on the ride back with you on Sunday, Ira, is that, there's somebody out there, I think, that compiles every AP ballot. Like, so I remember we would see that in the preseason, like, after maybe week 1, a couple people had vaulted Florida State up after they dismantled LSU. Other people had in, and they were getting grief from everybody on the kind of the Florida State sphere of the internet. We have no idea like who voted what in that room, and we never really have. And there's always been like an element of controversy, but usually they would get the 4. Usually they got the 4 best teams. They got it right. And people are saying that they got it right this time around. Guys like Paul Feinbaum, I think they're just really just trying to rub salt in the wound when they're on ESPN. But like a year like this, like you need transparency. I mean, if we're going to entrust you with this kind of power to pick the 4 teams that are going to play for this thing, and listen, the AP and the coaches poll still have Florida State in the top 4, right? I think coaches have Florida State 3rd. AP's got Florida State 4th. Meanwhile, these 12 folks in Grapevine are just like, this is what we did. Like, we're not going to tell you why, or trying to tell you why, but someone's name needs to be attached to this sort of stuff. I just feel
yeah, and even the Boo Corrigan's reasonings there's so many contradictions in everything. We're talking about Liberty, it's the wins mattered, but Florida State, the wins didn't matter.
Yeah. Liberty just kept winning.
Yeah, and so it's just it's frustrating, man, because, again, this is, when you look at this sport, we've always had to deal with some of this. The polls were silly. BCS was silly. Like we never, or not silly, but people were frustrated with the BCS. There's so many things that we've kind of gritted our teeth with. But to me, this is a fundamental problem with this sport right now is if everybody's not going to have access. And from a Florida State perspective, I've felt for a year now, and I still feel, and I'm pretty confident in, that Florida State's going to be in one of those 2 conferences. I think that's going to happen. When? I don't know. I don't think it's going to be 2036. I don't think it's going to be 2030. I think it's going to be sooner. I think there's going to be a way for Florida State to get in one of those conferences, so they'll be in the cool crowd. But again, if you're going to have these other conferences, so does that mean we're just going to relegate everybody other than the 30 or 32 or 40 schools in those 2 conferences? Everybody else is just out and they can't get in. It's just not good for the sport. I mean, the games aren't only watched by the teams that play them. The game is watched by college sports fans overall. And I think you're going to alienate a lot of college sports fans. I think a lot of people, again, like some of the calls and texts I got yesterday from people who aren't even FSU fans, they're concerned about the sport, because if it happens to Florida State, it could happen to anybody, and it probably will.
Well, thanks for being here on the Monday Smash. If you could hit the thumbs up, we certainly would appreciate it. You mentioned former Governor Rick Scott, current United States Senator from the state of Florida. We saw this stuff with Daryl Jackson trying to get a waiver. I think Governor DeSantis, tweeted or released something on Sunday. Is there anything, I don't know what the outcome would be, but I think people just like the fact that public servants are trying to battle for their alma mater, their favorite team. Do you have any sort of, opinion or able to distill kind of that 2-page release that Senator Scott released and what he's trying to get done?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, this is like the early steps. He's basically calling on them to be transparent and to to provide some documents about the process. But ultimately, I mean, yeah, they can do anything they want. They're Congress. If he could get Congress to get a panel together and call them together, I mean, just like in every other sport, scandal there's ever been, and they, whether it's steroids or NIL or whatever else, they can do that type of thing, and it's just a fact finding mission. I'm in favor of it. I mean, I just think the more transparency, the better, because it, again, it's one thing if we're splitting hairs, if it's a, and again, like, the college football, people will point to the NCAA selection committee in college basketball. That's 64 teams. And the teams that deserve to be in are getting in. If you're 65th or 66th, we feel bad for you, but we don't feel that bad for you. But if you're only picking 4 and you're going to leave out an undefeated Power 5 champion, it's ridiculous. And I think this resonated with everybody, man. I don't know if you've been on social media today, but I mean, it's been everybody from NFL stars to NBA stars to it's being asked about, press conferences everywhere. I mean, this is the story right now. And I just hope it doesn't die quickly. Like, I hope this isn't just some grandstanding by, any of these politicians, that somebody actually says, you know what, this is $1 billion business, and it's controlled right now basically by 2 networks for the most part. And we cannot just let them do whatever they're going to do to their own devices. Somebody needs to look at this. And if it's all on the up and up, and they turn over documents and emails and messages and all that, and it was all on the up and up, great. Now maybe we feel better about the sport. But the way it was kind of set up for weeks in the media on ESPN, I mean, again, nobody wants to be a conspiracy theorist, but it just feels like they were going to make sure that the SEC had a team in the playoff. There was not going to be a scenario where there was no SEC team in the playoff, and I just think that they paved the way for that all along.
Had this pulled up a little earlier, Ira. Then some people might forget, but SEC used to be on CBS for a while. They've been sharing some of their inventory here this past year, but starting next year, everything is on ESPN. They spent $3 billion to buy that inventory, ESPN. So feels like, you're not going to walk away from the CBS relationship if you're the SEC, if you're Greg Sankey, if you don't think ESPN is going to still look out for you in some instances. Like, you have to maybe call in a favor, maybe have some sort of ace up your sleeve, and probably was used in this case, seemingly.
I mean, think about the inconsistencies just in the Florida State case, just in the last week or two. So they went to Florida with Tate Rodemaker and didn't look good on offense, but pretty good on defense. Looked good on defense, didn't look good on offense. Going into the ACC Championship game, they're still number 4. Like, you have them at number 4 going into the ACC Championship game after the way they looked with Rodemaker. Then you play that game and you win it despite not having even Rodemaker. You don't have either of your top 2 quarterbacks. Your defense plays probably its best game we've seen a Florida State defense play in years. Maybe one of the best games in that kind of environment that I've seen a Florida State defense ever play. That Louisville team didn't suck. They scored 30 points in 8 games. 2 weeks ago, they scored 38 points at Miami. And Florida State's defense completely dominated them, completely shut them out. You still win the game, but you drop a spot? Like, why were they 4 the week before? And none of that makes sense to me.
Yeah, because Texas beat a team that was ranked lower than Florida State. Now, I guess you could say they beat them more impressively. But it is bizarre how that worked out. But I guess that kind of did happen in 14 too, right? I think TCU and Baylor, one of them was number 4 and then I think it was TCU and then ended up getting dropped out. So
but that's the thing. It's just
Ohio State who had just won their championship game.
Right. And again, it all goes to the feeling that these rankings every week are just for show, which is fine, whatever. I don't care. But how are you determining what are the criteria they put out there? Kirk Herbstreit keeps bringing up the thing about the injuries have to be considered. Well, yeah, fine, man, but that doesn't mean your season's over. Teams win after losing key players. And the point, I don't think anybody there seems to acknowledge is that this was not a one-man gang team. Florida State, Jordan Travis probably wasn't going to win the Heisman, wasn't going to make it to New York because this was not a one-man gang team. And so when you turn that argument, like I get it, if say Cam Newton's Auburn team had made it to the last week and then he went down with an injury, then okay, maybe. Or Tim Tebow's Florida team. I mean, those guys were the team. Jordan Travis wasn't the team. You saw that these last couple of weeks. That should have been more validation instead of turning it around. But I don't even want to go into that whole argument because I don't think it was a legitimate. I think it was a convenient argument for them to point to because they were going to make sure they got an SEC team in.
Thanks to Philip Thornton out there dropping $10 in the jar. Appreciate you, Philip. Says, what's up, fellas? Detoxing has started from Friday and Saturday. Drinking misery on Sunday. Yeah, give that liver a rest, everybody.
Thanks, Philip.
Thanks, man. Premier Youth Theater. I think they've actually made a T-shirt that says "robbed" and the O is the Seminole logo. I think they tweeted at us. Maybe it's a different theater troupe. Nonetheless, Premier Youth Theater, $5 in the jar. Thank you, PYT. Has a seed been planted for Mike Norvell to take it down the road if we don't immediately leave the ACC?
No, I don't think so. I do think the reality is that this was, I've had a lot of people say since this happened, is this a sign that Florida State needs to leave the ACC? Well, Florida State's wanted to leave the ACC for a long time, and they will leave the ACC whenever they can. And I don't think it's going to be years down the road. I think it could be within a year or two down the road. We'll see how that all plays out. But yeah, I mean, the reality is we're driving to this Power 2 conferences. And on the one hand, for Florida State's perspective, I think they're going to end up one of those conferences and that's good for them. But I still don't think that any of this is good for the sport. It's frustrating. So I don't know, man. Like, this has been the most troubling thing I've seen because it just doesn't it feels like something out of pro wrestling. It feels like Bret Hart getting his title taken away from him by Vince McMahon. But like in pro wrestling, at least we all know we're in on the joke. We're in on it. This is different. And it's just a complete screw job. What bothers me a little bit from the national media is a lot of the same people now who came out today ripping the college football playoff committee and saying Florida State should have been in. We're kind of saying the same crap over the last few weeks about Florida State, that they weren't winning that convincingly, that they, didn't have the style points, whatever. They kind of played with their food. They weren't dominating teams. And then turned around. And then once they actually did finish the deal, now they're all up in arms. So I don't know. I don't know if it would have mattered because I think they still were going to do what they wanted to do. But the whole thing's kind of frustrating.
Robert Benton, $5 in the jar. Thanks, Robert. They had us out of the playoffs before the ball was kicked off Saturday in Charlotte. Seth Hausman raises the ante, $10 in the jar. Thanks, Seth. Not the Seth that gave you those awesome binoculars, though, Ira. A different Seth.
We appreciate this Seth and the Seth that gave me the awesome binoculars.
Absolutely. The University of Central Florida beat Oklahoma State as badly as Texas did. That win was not impressive. Injuries are only for like records. 13-0 is not 12-1. Yeah, there'd have been a fair the whole head-to-head with Texas and Alabama. But if Quinn Ewers was out, I think most people would have been like, all right. I think even some Texas fans would probably been able to swallow the pill and like, all right, like Alabama's going to probably jump us because they have their quarterback and we don't. But they both were 12-1. Florida State was not in that group. They were not in that pod of the teams that lost. So frustrating indeed.
Yeah. The whole idea of we're evaluating these teams and, say there were 5 undefeated Power 5 champions. And, Georgia had stayed undefeated. And, if you had Big 12 champion was undefeated, all 5 of them were undefeated. And Florida State didn't have Jordan Travis and they kept out Florida State. I think we all would have been like, you know what? That sucks. But it makes sense. If you have somebody has to be left out and we don't have our all ACC quarterback player of the year, okay, that kind of makes sense. But that's not the case. To their point, it was you have 2 teams with 1 loss that were below you and somehow leapfrog you.
Jen Fari, what's up, Jen? $5 in the jar, thanks. Says, when will we find out what players are staying and playing in the bowl game? That is a fluid situation. I want to bring this one up here too. Thanks again, Jen. Speaking about the bowl game, Ira, there's a lot of people that are saying boycott. There's some funny ones out there. I think somebody put in the comments earlier tonight about just receive the kickoff and then walk off the field.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't want them to boycott the game. My buddies are all mad. Like, I'm not going to watch the game. I'm like, you're all going to watch the game. You're mad right now, but Florida State's on TV. They're playing Georgia. You're going to watch the game. And I don't know what you would gain from this. And I don't think it's anywhere near on the table of anybody's thoughts, but what do you have to say or your thoughts on people that are advocating for Florida State to take a stand by, I don't know, boycotting this New Year's Six bowl game?
Yeah, I want to touch on the first question first about when we'll know who's going to be there and who's not. And It's going to be a fluid process, like you said. There are some players that have already posted comments on social media that make you feel like they're moving on. Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, Jaheim Bell, a couple other guys. And but I don't think anybody definitively has announced we're out, that we're not coming. That'll probably be done through Florida State or in conjunction with Florida State. Usually the university will help them put together a social media message that's more definitive. Excuse me. I think these messages so far have been a little bit vague. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those guys are going to opt out, and we'll be seeing those announcements as we get closer to practices starting. Practices probably will start next week. So as we get closer to that, I think they'll be putting out their official statements. But yeah, I mean, there are definitely going to be some departures. We've also had several guys that have already gone in the transfer portal that people can read about on the site or watch the video that I think Tom did earlier. But as far as the other question was,
just boycotting the bowl game.
Oh, boycotting the bowl game. Yeah, I know. I mean, I understand the idea of like some sort of protest. I'm all for that. And I don't know what that looks like, but they need to play in the game. I mean, I believe you're part of a conference, you're part of the sport. You got invited to play in the Orange Bowl. You go play in the Orange Bowl. Fans who say they're not going to watch it, I get it. I think you just have to look from a different perspective. Excuse me. I would look at it like, here's going to be a chance to watch a lot of guys who are going to be on next year's team, because I think you are going to be missing some guys from this year's team. And Georgia's going to be in the same boat. So it's not like you're going to be – I don't think it's going to be like Florida State's going to be shorthanded and Georgia's going to have everybody they've got and you're just going to get pummeled. I think both teams are going to be missing a lot of players and playing to kind of build for next season. So if you still like Florida State, I still think it's worth watching and going to if you weren't going to go to it. Bowl games are fun, but I also get the frustration. I do think there should be some sort of protest, whether it's wearing shirts, ribbons, I don't know what the idea is, but I would come up with something.
You're watching the Monday Smash here on YouTube TV. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe to our channel. The Monday Smash is presented by our good friend, State Farm agent Russ Voorhis.
Contact Russ Voorhis for an auto quote today.
Welcome back to the Smash. Pretty Nole girl. Why do recruits want to come here if we can go 13-0 and still not play for a national title? The committee screwed us.
Real quick, I just want to say one more thing about Russ, and I'm not going to go on too long, Russ Voorhis, because I'm not feeling great with the voice. But yeah, go to russvoorhis.com is the website, and Russ provides insurance for people in the state of Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. He's got 2 offices in the Jacksonville area, in Jacksonville Beach and Orange Park. You can watch the video. We've got the address and phone numbers on here, or you go to russvoorhis.com and get his information, and you can get a quote or talk to one of the customer service people or talk to Russ and commiserate about Florida State football. Yeah, the recruiting thing's it's something that I think a lot of people are freaking out about because, college coaches are always going to negative recruit for anything that they can negative recruit about. Like Mike Norvell had that comment a few weeks ago. When we were losing the first couple of years, people said, oh, you don't want to go to Florida State because they're going to be fired and they won't be there. Now, when they're 13-0, people were saying, oh, well, you don't want to go there. Those coaches are going to leave for better jobs or they're going to find other opportunities. So I just think that that's part of the game. So there's going to be negative recruiting. You're definitely going to have schools, certainly in the SEC, telling these kids, you don't want to go there. You could go 13-0, not even get invited to the playoff. So I get that that's a concern, but I would say the two things Florida State has working in their favor right now is that the playoff field is going to expand to 12 next year. So you can refute that pretty quickly. And then long term, like I said, I don't think you're going to be in the ACC long term. I don't know what just happened Sunday, if that affects anything, but in terms of bad blood, but I still think there's a good chance. I'm still expecting Florida State to find their way to one of those conferences, and then it won't be a point.
Let us hope. Easy Quiet, $5 towards a cause. The jar. Thanks, Easy Quiet. Any insight if Florida State University leadership has done anything behind the scenes? Was it just the statements from Sunday and that's it? I think somebody tracked the plane of Michael Alford and supposedly he was going to Charlotte. Everyone's like, well, he's probably going to the national title game for soccer. And everyone's like, well, it's Cary, North Carolina. That's not close to Charlotte. Anything they're going to do, you think, Ira, here behind the scenes? Could you think of even what that would entail?
Yeah, I mean, they're frustrated. There's no question. I think people at FSU are frustrated that the ACC didn't do more to lobby for them, but I also don't really know what it would have mattered. If Jim Phillips, had called, the playoff committee or called ESPN or whatever and said, why are you guys screwing our team over these last several weeks? I don't know that it would have changed anything. And I also don't know that the committee would have said, okay, you're right. I mean, I don't know. I think that, ESPN and the SEC and Fox and Big Ten are so aligned right now, and they're the ones that really control this whole operation, that lobbying wasn't going to change anybody's mind. Now, you could argue that maybe they would have changed the narrative, but I don't know how you do that. They control on College Game Day on Saturday, if you didn't know Florida State was in trouble, you should have known Florida State was in trouble Saturday morning, College Game Day, when it basically was an SEC infomercial. They brought Greg Sankey out, the commissioner of the SEC, to explain why no matter what happens, if Alabama wins this game, they have to be in the playoff. But he was on there for like 10 minutes. And, they didn't bring Jim Phillips out there. And, and I get that the whole idea is, Jim Phillips could just storm the set. And, yes, they're both partners. Yes, the ACC is a partner with ESPN, just like the SEC is a partner with ESPN, but they're completely different levels of partners. It's like if a business has, for example, when you worked in TV, right, you might have one advertiser who spends $100,000 a year with you, or one advertiser who spends $5,000 a year with you. The business is different. They're both clients, but they're different levels. And I don't think Jim Phillips could have done anything to change it. I think they were going to do what they were going to do, but I get the frustration. And, you can make a case that Florida State should have been a little more proactive in their messaging. They tried to a little bit late in the game, but I also think they were operating under the assumption, like most people were, that if you go 13-0, if you win the conference and you're in a Power 5 conference, they've always gotten in, so they'll get you in. They'll find a place for you. And they didn't do it.
Not the former guitarist of the Eagles. Did Henley play the guitar? Was he just a vocalist, or did he do both?
Dude, I'm not. You got the wrong guy. I like the Eagles, but I'm not sure if he was lead guitar or just a singer.
Not Don Henley, but Don Hensley. $5 in the jar. Thanks, Don. Boy of Summer, I think.
I'm sure someone will tell us in the chat.
Can someone please explain how Michigan is even allowed to participate in the college football playoff after being found guilty of cheating? They're America's team, Don. Next question.
Aslan, you're not going to get that Michigan slander past Aslan. Yeah, dude, that's like one of the 30 layers that was so disgusting about that day to me. It's and again, I said I wasn't going to go into the whole campaigning because I think it's all over, and I don't think it was a fair competition anyway. But the whole premise of sports. The whole fabric of sports, whether it's little league, whether it's middle school, high school, or college, and this is why it's created such outrage. The reason there's so much outrage across the country right now is because if you've played sports or your kids played sports, you just watch sports, you like sports, the fabric of it, the beauty of it is that teams can accomplish things together that you probably couldn't accomplish by yourself. And so you bring people together and they each raise each other up, and you have these special moments, these special teams that, the NC State's beating Georgetown's or Houston. You have these moments where you do the unthinkable as a team. And this Florida State team should have been embraced for that. Should have been, just saluted and championed by ESPN. Instead, they were just ridiculed for those last several weeks, while Michigan has what they had going on, and it's not even a concern. So the two things weren't, it wasn't like Michigan got in, I don't think, at the expense of Florida State. I think they were always going to get in. But from a perception standpoint, yeah, man, it's another reason the sport looks gross today, because that team gets rewarded and Florida State gets penalized for overcoming the loss of their top players. Unbelievable. I mean, it's just, again, this is why people are so mad.
Next up here, we got Eric Gravitt. Eric throwing $50. Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Strong in the hole. Thank you, Eric. Great shows by everyone today on Warchant, as always. Stay strong, fellow FSU players, coaches, and fans. We will continue to rise together. I know it's hard to look at silver linings right now, Ira, but, Florida State probably had no business scoring any points against Louisville with just how ineffective Brock Glenn was. And listen, we were at practice for 2 days. I don't really remember, even not just last Tuesday and Wednesday, Ira, but they didn't seemingly practice a lot of Wildcat throughout the year. And now listen, I'm sure, it's not that difficult of a thing to implement. You can maybe do it in a hotel ballroom and kind of figure it out on a Friday. But the fact they were able to pivot in game and get everything adjusted to make that offense move the ball and score some points, and the way that defense played, you just feel like with the way Battle's End supports this program, and I know it's such a hard pill to swallow because it's so freaking hard to get to 13-0. And you rarely get these opportunities. And when you do, you for sure want to be able to capitalize on it. You're not able to. But man, it just feels like this is a real, truly strongly built program that's going to sustain. And I know that doesn't make you probably feel all that much better right now if you're watching this. But man, I couldn't feel any more confident about the direction of this program coming off that win on Saturday, despite whatever 12 people in a room in Grapevine, Texas think about them right now after they lost their quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, that's the frustrating thing about it. That the night we had in Charlotte on Friday night was one of the coolest, fan experiences that we've probably had. I mean, just people were so happy. They're so excited about the direction of the program. They feel so good about what this team accomplished, and it's been such a great season. Then Saturday night, the players' reactions in on the field, and then in the interviews that we had, so many different guys overcame big things to, Tatum Bethune playing through a knee injury in that game. And like you said, building an offense when you're putting a freshman quarterback out there, Lawrence Toafili. I mean, they were in a bunch of sets where it's Lawrence Toafili in the Wildcat with CJ Campbell, who by the way went in the portal today. So, I mean, they're just, making chicken salad on offense to try to find a way to win that game. In the defense, just playing relentlessly. Every series that the offense had did nothing in the first half. It didn't matter. The defense went out and got a 3-and-out. And so that's kind of what this season was all about, was this both sides picking up each other. And so after the game, the way they celebrated, I don't remember seeing coaches and players so happy. I mean, they were. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, we were both on the field and people probably saw it on TV and you could see it in the videos, but it was kind of like a movie where you have this wonderful scene and all these happy moments. Everybody's so happy. And then you realize they cut to the next scene and, their dreams are dashed. It's so hard to kind of contextualize, but yeah, I agree with you. The program's in good place. Mike Norvell and his staff have done a great job. There's still a ton of talent on this roster. They're going to be good again next year. The program's heading in the right direction. It just sucks for it to end that way.
Joe Zucchi maybe. If we had any type of power, FSU would not be the program being left out. As a fan, it's frustrating. Not one coach from the ACC stood up for us. I mentioned on the drive back on Sunday too, Ira. I just feel like every AD in the SEC was probably excited to see that Alabama got in. I feel like no AD in the ACC probably really cared. They're just like, oh, wow, really? Huh. How's lacrosse looking right now? And like Dave, I'm not, what's Dave Dorn going to do? What's Dave Clawson going to do? And I haven't checked their social media accounts. I don't know how active they are. But, man, like, you've played against that coach. Like, you've played against this program. Like, you figure somebody would at least throw a bone. I mean, try to create some kind of uproar because, I mean, if it can happen to Florida State, it can happen to all of you. But you're never going to be in that situation, so I guess you really can't empathize.
Yeah, it's a weird deal. I think some people are conflating the acrimony between FSU and the ACC is having something to do with Boo Corrigan not really pushing for Florida State, or Jim Phillips not really pushing for Florida State, or excuse me, the FSU, what Feinbaum said, FSU made the ACC look bad by what it did this summer, and they've got to reap what they sow. FSU wasn't ripping the ACC's quality of play. It was complaining that your network doesn't pay them as much enough to be competitive with the SEC. That's what they're frustrated by. If they can make, Florida State can make anywhere near what they can make, what schools in the SEC and Big Ten make, and stay in the ACC, they would sign up for that in a heartbeat. But they can't. So that's why they're trying to get out. But as far as, other schools stepping up, I'll be honest with you. I wasn't in there for the press conference with after the game when you guys were in there with Jeff Brom.
Yeah.
But did he
I
say
wasn't either.
I thought you went in there. Okay, my bad. But like in basketball, how many times in college basketball, so say Florida State's playing NC State in college basketball, or North Carolina, college basketball late in the year. It's very common that like the North Carolina coach, even if they win the game, will say that Florida State team should be in the tournament. They're one of the best 64 teams. You can't tell me that team shouldn't be in the tournament. And that kind of campaigning, I don't know if it has a direct result or not, but it might hurt. It might help. You didn't see, I don't know. I don't think Jeff Brom said anything along those lines. And it would have been nice if more people in the ACC would have been voicing that. But Florida State's also not seen as, everybody's favorite in the conference right now because they're trying to leave. So I get it, but it only hurts your conference. This Florida State getting left out, to me, doesn't make Florida State look terrible. It makes as much as it does makes the ACC look terrible.
Yeah. Wonder if this would have happened to Dabo. Jordan Newton, I mean, I know we don't have an updated every single, month, the proration of the grant of rights, but last we reported on this stuff, I guess over the summer when the Board of Trustees meetings were kind of trickling out there, or maybe it was during the spring. I can't keep track. Football season is a crazy time, everybody. But Jordan Newton wonders, how much do we need to pay to fund the exit? I mean, what was the number in the spring? Do you even recall what it was when we were talking about if Florida State was going to go completely nuclear and try to walk at that point from there?
Well, there's two separate numbers that get talked about. One is the exit fee, which would be, in the neighborhood of $100 million. But then there's the grant of rights with the TV deal that goes till 2036, which you're talking about 13 or 14 more years at, close to $40 million a year. So people have thrown out the number of $400 or $500 million down to $150 to $200 million. Nobody knows exactly. The exit fee is going to have to be paid. There's no question about that. I don't think, unless the conference completely folds, I think the exit fee, they're probably going to be on the hook for that. And then the question is the grant of rights legal? Can they fight that? And that's kind of where we're in a holding pattern. FSU and a bunch of these other schools, Clemson, North Carolina, Miami, have all been looking at the grant of rights with attorneys to see if they can get out of it or get it reduced. That's never been challenged in court, but I think that's one of the avenues Florida State's looking at. I don't think there's any chance Florida State pays $300, $400, $500 million to get out. And I do think they're going to get out. So my guess is the number is going to be closer to that $100 million, but I don't know the mechanics of how it's going to happen. Can you fund the exit? I'm sure if you call Seminole boosters and tell them you want to help contribute to it, they'll take your money. There's not an actual fund being held right now, publicly at least. They might be doing it privately.
Yeah. Ira, the portal has opened up, opened at midnight. So about 20 hours worth of the portal or so has been out there. Any of the names catch you off guard so far?
Oh, the Florida State guys are going in?
Yeah.
No, not really. I would have. AJ Duffy makes, I think everybody's seen that's coming. He's a guy who, I've had a couple of people message me asking about him, but it just wasn't progressing. He came in, talented guy. I liked him a lot when he first got here, but he just didn't seem to be grasping the offense, didn't really seem to be moving up the depth chart or at least strengthening his position. Then you bring in Brock Glenn and he passes him as a true freshman. It seemed very unlikely that AJ Duffy was going to stay here, so that's not a surprise. Preston Daniel a little bit because he's a walk-on, but it also may be a situation where he wants to see if he can get an opportunity somewhere else. He's really worked hard to be a contributor. He is a contributor, but he's not a scholarship guy. CJ Campbell also not a scholarship guy. I'll be writing something on him, but yeah, I mean, it's Preston Marquise and Douglas is one I think some people are a little curious about because he was a scholarship guy. And Jaheim Bell, you have to assume, is leaving after this season. You assume he's going to the NFL. But I'm guessing Marquise either doesn't feel like, he's going to be a big part of their offense, or maybe they're encouraging him to find a place where he's going to be able to play because he didn't play much this year.
Yeah. Obviously, Kyle Morlock, Jackson West was a guy that started playing a little bit more as the season wore on. I mean, not necessarily maybe getting targets, but out there on the field. So, what do you think about quarterback, Ira? Do you think? I mean, I don't think Duffy leaving really affects the plans. Again, I'm sure that's something the coaching staff was probably bracing for. Do you think quarterback is a position they'll not want to say target, but at least maybe kick some tires on, or do you think the way that either Tate or Brock looks in the bowl game might affect the direction Florida State wants to go when it comes to quarterbacks and portal usage?
Yeah, I think they were always going to look. I don't know if it was a situation where they were thinking, okay, we're definitely going to get a portal quarterback. You do have Luke Kremenhawk coming in January. So you'll have 3 scholarship quarterbacks, him, Tay Rodemaker, and Brock Glenn. But yeah, I think more than Duffy leaving, I think it might be just the fact that neither of those guys looked like sure things. I think Tate was put in a tough situation. The swamp, a lot of bad situations. I think there was a game where they just tried to get out of it with a win. They weren't really that worried about scoring a lot of points. I think they just wanted to not turn it over. So I don't want to judge him too much on it, but it wasn't like he blew you away. There's no way Florida State's coaches came out of the game going, this is definitely our guy, 100%. Clearly the same for Brock Glenn. So while I don't think it's fair to judge either one of them, is that that's what they're going to be, I think they're probably going to need to go get a quarterback. So I think you'll see them very active. And now what happens if they do that, though, is does Tate stay? We'll have to see. But I think they'll target one.
This is only a slow trickle. I mean, assume there's going to be more than 4 guys that announce their intentions of leaving. And not for the pros, but to enter the portal, Ira. Yeah.
There's going to be, plenty more. Part of it is, it's guys as they get older. If you're trying to guess or predict ahead, if you go to the depth chart on Seminoles.com or the ones we've posted in the past, and if you see guys that are getting up in their careers, but they're still not on the 2 deep depth chart, a lot of those guys are going to, they're going to look for a better opportunity. So, we'll see some of these guys on the line of scrimmage that have not moved up. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think it's going to be a wholesale, but the reality is in college football, there's 2 things in play. Is nobody wants to sit and wait because, there's a chance they can go somewhere else. And then also there's the NIL opportunities. And Florida State's got a great partner in the Battle's End. And a lot of the guys can make money through the Battle's End. But other guys, if they're not, they want to either get a starting job or they want some guarantees. So, yeah, I think that number is definitely going to increase.
We got a running thread over on the Tribal Council, warchant.com, of any players from Florida State that have entered their name in the portal. Michael Langston's got a thread over on the PRB about potential targets, and we're posting videos on our YouTube channel. So subscribe to all of that, everybody. Be on the forefront, cutting edge of everything. That was a palate cleanse of about 5 minutes. Let's get back into commiserating over Florida State getting hosed. Or as my buddy who lives in Boston, Iris, sent me, I forgot. There's like one of the guys up there is like a pretty, he's been doing the Boston sports thing for a long while, like Feltzker or something. I don't know. But anyway, my buddy sent me a 3.5 minute cutout from their show. And he's like, listen, hey, we don't talk about college, football, but what happened in Florida State was absolutely crazy. They used the word porked and boned. So God bless the Bay State of Massachusetts giving us those sort of things. Dan Rapplinger gives us $5 and says, Ira, that I feel that a one-loss Texas, one-loss Georgia, one-loss Bama, one-loss anyone was getting in front of Florida State now that we see what the agenda was.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty clear to me. And I don't know if it's just, and again, the reason you don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, right? Nobody wants to be that guy. But the arguments that Kirk Herbstreit and that crew made never made any sense. The day that they ripped Florida State, for the way they looked against Florida without their starting quarterback, was the same day that Alabama needed a Hail Mary basically to beat Auburn. And Auburn stunk. Like Auburn was basically a 500 team that got blown out by New Mexico State 2 weeks earlier. And Alabama was not good at all in that game. And then, other teams, Michigan, there's just been so many examples the other night. Michigan's offense with their starting quarterback put up less yards against Iowa than Florida State did with Brock Glenn at quarterback. So none of the arguments made sense. So that makes you think, well, there's got to be something else at play. And then when you look at the financials and you look at the fact that the ESPN, like you brought up that contract, and that's not all of it. I think that's basically the part about the 3:30 game, like that window that they took from CBS. There's more money that goes to the SEC as well. That's their dancing partner, and I think they were going to do whatever they could to make sure they were in.
Our guy Jeff Mayers, Colorado Nole, I think, on the warchant.com message board, dropping $20 in the jar. Thanks, Jeff. With as underhanded and conniving as the ESPN SEC duo is, could this be part of a larger plan to ultimately break up the ACC and get FSU and Clemson to the SEC without the ridiculous exit fees?
Well, that's the deep cut,
the
long play. Yeah. I don't think it was directly have anything to do with that. But again, the reason Florida State's been doing everything they've been doing to try to get out is because they feel like they can't compete as long as they stay in the ACC. Well, if they've got to find a home, and I think, the question is, some people wonder whether or not the SEC wants FSU and Clemson and some of those teams. I think my belief is that Big Ten is very active and very interested in expanding in the Southeast. We've seen what they've done to become like a national conference. So I think that could lead to the pressure on the SEC. But I think if they want to break up the ACC, they can break up the ACC. I mean, I just think that's the TV partners. I believe can really make the whole thing. They can make the process happen without having to do any shenanigans. I think they could just do it. So I don't think that was the play, but in the long term, it may be part of it, because I think if you're in the ACC right now, you think, well, we're screwed.
If this, I don't know how to phrase this, but let's just say that Florida State was going to get an invite from one of these other power conferences in 2027. Is it worth taking this big steaming pile of what if you get into that conference like in 2025 instead?
Right.
There's a deep cut for you. Shout out to everybody who's been keeping us posted about the women's soccer team and their quest for another national championship. They lead 4-1 over number 2 Stanford with under 10 minutes to go. I think it's even ballooned more than that by now. Nope, 4-1 still. So shout out to Coach Penske and the ladies. I'm not jinxing everybody. There's 7 minutes left. If they were to lose this would be absolutely cataclysmic. And we've already had one bolt of lightning hit us, so I'll celebrate that one. So that's always a great thing to celebrate. So maybe they can use that platform. That'd be great, right? If the women's soccer team just was like turn their backs, like we don't want your trophy.
Right.
We don't want your
Right.
trophy. That's the
Yeah,
NCAA, though. The college football playoff committee is different. That's not the NCAA.
Right. Yeah, but if you guys do have ideas, we'll help spread the word. Reach out to us. Post on the message boards. We're all for some sort of statement, whether it's a silent statement or a vocal statement about the frustration. And this is one of the few times that has Florida State ever been the school that everybody's rallying around? I mean, it's been crazy today to see all the people that are coming to Florida State's defense and outraged by it.
Yeah, man.
Cool.
Like Mike Greenberg's an honorary Seminole. I thought he went to Northwestern, but he used Get Up. He used his Twitter. He used his radio show. I've seen a lot of people retweeting him, just kind of going nuts. And pretty much everybody on Get Up this morning, I think with the exception of Dan Orlovsky, was totally on Florida State's side and did not see the rationale for leaving them out. Orlovsky was saying, listen, it's the quarterback position. They're a completely different team with Jordan Travis. They looked better without him, maybe, but he couldn't. But then he couched it at the end of it, like, listen, he's like, I'm heartsick for that team though, which I don't think Corey likes because he retweeted Todd McShay, who I think said something similar about like, oh, I feel terrible, I feel gutted for the Florida State players and coaches, but I think the committee got it right. And I think Corey retweeted something like, well, as long as you're gutted, Todd, then that makes it all okay.
Yeah, that's a good one. Here's the thing. I almost cursed.
5-1.
5-1. They have no idea who the best team is. They have no freaking idea. Nobody does. It's a stupid premise. This doesn't work. You can't decide. If you could, we'd all be making money every weekend in Vegas. Nobody would ever lose bets. If you could watch games, and I don't care who's in that room, those people, come on. I mean, that's not, half of them aren't even like really football people. Their opinions aren't any better than anybody else's. They don't know who's better. Coaches don't know who better. I could talk to Mike Norvell today and ask him who's going to win this game. And he might be wrong. They don't know. Nobody knows. You can't decide it. That's why you play. And so the idea that this committee gets to say, oh, well, they're not as good because they don't have their quarterback. Yes, they're probably not as good as an offense. Yeah, they're definitely not as good as an offense, but the team could play better. The team could play really well. The defense completely changed. The defense was unbelievable in that game on Saturday. Could they have done it against Michigan? I don't know. But that's why you play the games. It's so ridiculous to again, the week before they had Ohio State over Michigan, so Michigan beat Ohio State. Then they moved up. They've been wrong how many times? So to say we're going to keep you out because we know who's better, no, you don't. It's so infuriating. But again, I don't want to get emotional because I don't think it was. I really don't think it was about that anyway. I think it was about money.
Would have been better if like Georgia was 5 and Florida State was 6. I mean, it's all crazy, right? Because Georgia, listen, we all thought Georgia was the best team. We were like, we do not want to play Georgia. I don't want to play Georgia in the playoff. Let somebody else play them. And then they got beat by Alabama. So like, I'm just as guilty, obviously, here of thinking who's best and not knowing it. And we should
Georgia and two of their best players were also injured, whatever. But like the Florida State shouldn't have been 5. If they're so different, they're so bad, put them at 10 or whatever. And it should have been 4 the week before. I thought the performance against Louisville in the ACC Championship game was a more impressive performance to me overall, considering what you're dealing with, than even what we saw in Gainesville. So why would you drop? I mean, it's just Well
said. Well said. And with that, we'll wrap this thing up. The portal is open, everybody. So we've got that over on warchant.com, letting you know who's entering and who Florida State's kicking the tires on. Michael Langston's got that over on the premium recruiting board. We got a running thread of Florida State players entering it over on the Tribal Council. Early signing period's a thing that's going on. So any sort of 24 prospects out there, we've got the latest on. Florida State soccer team currently up 5-1.
Congratulations to them.
That one. So That's all but done. Seminole headlines. Is that coming up tomorrow, Ira, you three?
It should be. It should be. We'll be Corey's up in Atlanta, I believe. So I think it'll be maybe on Zoom, or at least him on Zoom, or maybe all of us because I'm sick. So we'll see. But yeah, we'll definitely do a Seminole headlines tomorrow.
Will there be a coach speak?
Coach speak coming up later this week. Yeah, we'll be transitioning to basketball. We might try to have some football in there as well. It'll probably be a mixture of football and basketball.
Okay. All right. All that over at warchant.com. Corey and I'll have wake up, I think, for you tomorrow as well, probably. Anything else I left off, Ira? Feel like we touched it mostly there.
Yeah, no, we're good. Plenty of, like I said, plenty of recruiting and transfer portal coverage coming as well. Matt and Michael are working on some of that stuff.
All right. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. If you get that thumbs up on the way out, if you haven't done so already, we certainly would appreciate it. Thanks to our guy, Russ Vorhis. Check him out, russvorhis.com, russvorhis.com. He can help you with your insurance needs in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. He's a Nole. Good dude. Give him a shout. For Ira Schofel, managing editor of warchant.com, I'm Aslan Hudjavandy. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. We certainly appreciate it. Stay connected to warchant.com, your ultimate Seminoles sports source.